Without a question, epidemic risk has become a global strategic concern. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we have had to respond to so many health emergencies at once. This is a new normal. I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to reduce, and in fact, vulnerabilities all over the world, developed and developing countries, have increased, not decreased, driven by many factors, mainly through human behaviour, economic development, population density, and many others. The scenario you will be presented with this morning could easily become a shared reality one day. I fully expect that we will be confronted by a fast-moving, highly lethal pandemic of a respiratory pathogen. The question is, are we prepared to globally respond to the next major pandemic event? Are we ready to cooperate and perform across countries and across sectors to face such a threat? Have we established the surveillance and risk assessment systems, the communication tools, the supply chains, and the business continuity plans that will be needed not only to protect health in a major epidemic or pandemic, but to protect economic development, to protect political and social systems? Do we collectively drive innovation enough to face the evolving global threats which we are anticipating?
Battlefront.
Battlefront SouthGate. I am your host, Dustin Faulkner. And you might look and recognize that some things seem to be a little different. That's right, I'm appearing before you. I told you guys a while back that we were working on our studio. We've been doing some things really good around here. Some good business. We are trying to take care of some things as we're building Battlefront Broadcasting. And what a better time to do it than when you have no job. It's really not funny, is it? No. And that's one of the things that we are going to be discussing today. We are going to present to you what we've seen as a practice run for what we have experienced today. And I know that you guys are a very smart audience. I know that you have the research capabilities. I know that you have the intellect that you should be even sending things to me, right? Right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about an event that was put on by the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Johns Hopkins University, a Bloomberg School. And we're going to talk to you about this. And we're going to tell you how in that scenario, which was about 3 or so hours long, they practiced for what was going to happen to us today. And we're going to go to something very quickly right now that you will see in cut one of our guy speaking to you about something that sounds all familiar. When this all happened, how every single person was going and saying this. This includes the conservative pundits, the echo chambers out there that think that they are better, and the go-to people. And you even heard people like Hannity echoing this. And as we go to this cut and you see what is the first thing that they said, that's right, all hands on deck. And this is Ryan Morehard as he's giving the intro before they start this war game scenario called Event 201. And let's go ahead and listen to what he had to say.
Welcome to Event 201. 201. Throughout our session today, I hope that number will represent two dimensions of our work to strengthen global health security. First, today, there are 200 epidemic events every year, and it hasn't always been this way. The number is increasing, driven by globalization, climate change, urbanization, deforestation, and other trends of our modern world. In other words, we're in a new era of epidemic risk. And the second dimension is that one of these days, one of these epidemic events will be a pandemic, a fast-moving pandemic. And mitigating risk and impact of that pandemic will require an all-hands-on-deck approach.
And as you just heard there, he said that there are 200 of these events that go on throughout the year. And that's why this scenario, they call it Event 201. This is going to be the event which knocks our socks off, which takes and becomes a very fast-spreading pandemic. And we all know that we've dealt with these things before with the Ebola virus. We've also dealt with H1N1, which is the swine flu. But I want you to think about something that he said in there. And he rivaled this with climate change. And he also talked about how deforestation and all of these other liberal, leftist, world-worshipping, economy-destroying, capitalist-hating people do. And so, because he's talking about all of this, and of course, you know, there was a little loaded thing, if you would catch that, he said the population density, and that is something that we need to be thinking, as you also heard from our guy who we'll be talking about later, who is over this, that sent us into oblivion. And he's with the WHO. But here he says it's going to require an all-hands-on-deck approach. Now, one might ask, what does he mean by that? Well, I'll tell you what he means by that. He's talking about all of the globalists getting together, bringing together all of the companies. And notice, public-private partnerships. Now see, that's the buzzwords that you've been hearing a lot about. In fact, you've heard the White House say it repeatedly. You've heard all of the people say this, including the pundits. You've heard them, even Hannity was bragging about this when we first started going into this issue. And we'll get to some of that later, why I believe that he would be echoing some of these things, because we know that they are in the know of things. We know. I think that honestly, people like him have been co-opted themselves. I'd hate to say something like that about him, but it just seems more and more that that's come to fruition, because some of the things he refuses to talk about, he sometimes he kind of avoids, you know, Islam and the problem that we face with that throughout the whole world. He has talked about it at some points, but he has not been tough on it as all of us would have been. And what we need to be understanding here is this all-hands-on-deck approach. You get all of these companies together who are ready, by the way, to take on this effort to get to use this issue, which we have faced today. Now, if you look, this started, they did this scenario back in 2019 in October. They also uploaded the videos that is about the Event 201. There are 5 of them, and they are all different segments of how they got together and then talked about the different areas that they were going to deal with the issue in order to stop this pandemic. So maybe even a few weeks later, and a lot of this wasn't spoken about, you can go back to our timeline on the Wuhan virus back several weeks ago when we did that, before we started moving and doing other things here. We were on a roll about that when we were talking about and telling you how China didn't even talk about how the thing was originally released. And we know that it came out of a lab there. And the more and more that I have investigated, the more and more that it seems that it's likely this was a man-made bioweapon that, remember, at first I thought it was accidentally released from it, but it just seems to fall in line here that we're facing it being a concerted plan attack. And why would I say something like that? I would say something like that because of what we've seen the practice here. And everything seems to fall in line, especially with some of the newscasts. Hey guys, let's go ahead and cue up a cut here, and I want to show you, and you tell me when this first comes on, when you watch this, if it doesn't seem like everything that you've heard come out of the news media and everything that you've seen immediately following after this virus was released onto the public and became a pandemic. And what we'll see here is what looks exactly like it was planned.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities. International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAPS started in South America, but has now reached several countries with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
Wow. How does that look like everything that we have seen to this some of the things when it was starting? And then you think about this, look at that, they call it CAPS, and it is a coronavirus that came from swine. Of course, we just dealt with a pandemic which scared a lot of people, but we didn't shut down an economy, especially worldwide, to deal with this issue, and it killed so far a great number more than the people that have been killed today regarding the coronavirus. And what did it look like there? It came from the swine flu. They said that people weren't even recognizing that they had it. And then another issue that they were saying, it was causing a couple of thousand deaths there, and how it was spreading quickly. Look, right there. It says it started there in South America, and of 30,000 cases and 2,000 deaths. Now, one would say that that's pretty scary, but it started there in South America through the pigs. And a thing that we started hearing out of the Wuhan was a lot of people were spreading the rumors that it was perhaps that it came from some of the food there in the wet markets. And a lot of us believe this. I, first of all, was the person that did believe that this was one of these happened. That was a lot longer before I came across the Event 201 put on by these detrimental organizations to the U.S. And if you look how CAPS began to spread to the 7 countries, they were saying in the newscast. What happened here? It came out of the China. They allowed 7 million people a month of travel time in that, by the way, to go into Italy. And Italy is a socialist healthcare country. So obviously when you deal with countries like that, they're not able to handle things as we would. And it started spreading very fast. And it was quite curious how they used the wet markets there as an excuse to say it came from there, because a lot of us are disgusted by the things that go there. And see, this is the way the communists think. They know that they can blame it on their common people. And so what happens is they release that there, and a lot of those people that travel from the Hubei province go into the various other countries. So this virus ended up being extremely communicable, to say the least. And so some of the issues that we ran into was that it was spreading to people. And we didn't know a whole lot about the virus when it came along. So that was an issue there. And we know that we have a lot to deal with when it comes to that. We know that now, as we come to this point, that it kills people with underlying conditions. If you are healthy, it does affect you in some way. It does make you very sick. It's been putting people down pretty hard. Some people handle it better than others, but they get over it. And the cases are still well under 2% of the death rate, and so what are we having to do here? You shut the country down by causing this so-called pandemic, as we'll talk about here later, because we're coming up on a break. But you'll see that it was actually planned out on what some of the things were that they were going to implement. As you get these companies together, you get the organizations like the WHO over everything. You have to, like Ryan there, who's one of the people over the organization. And he was telling us before we began our program about how he expected this to be the next pandemic, and how curious it is that it quickly came after this little event that they put on. And we all should be examining that, because that is very, very concerning, because now we have shut down our economy, and now not just that, we have allowed government officials to go and shut down private sectors. Now, not all government officials do that. You've seen some pretty good governors, such as the one in South Dakota, who said she's not going to do some kind of crap like that. But we've even had here in the state of Texas our good governor, who you're concerned for citizens, of course. But how prepared was it they were able to shut down these things? And when we come back, we will begin to delve more into this Event 201, and then we're going to sit here and compare and see some of the reasons that we are dealing with this and why we think that this was a prepared event. This is Battlefront SouthGate.
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreaks. There are now more than 30,000 reported cases. Experts warn this may be just the beginning of a global problem. GNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about CAPS, the virus, the outbreak, and the resulting chaos.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years. Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza. Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods in some megacities in South America. CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems. The fatality rate is about 10%. For comparison, CAPS is about as lethal as SARS and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 1918 influenza pandemic, the worst pandemic on record. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities could respond and contain them. In other places, physicians have quickly recognized the symptoms of CAPS and have been able to isolate infected individuals and avoid an outbreak, for now. Global public health experts are very concerned about this disease because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person. Essentially, all people are susceptible. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere. Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Given the global population is 4 times larger than it was in 1918, if these models prove accurate, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of deaths over the next year or 2.
And we're back. I am your host, Dustin Faulkner, and this is Battlefront SouthGate. And as you just heard on that newscast, you would see that there is an issue with a comparison to the 1918 flu. Now, we've been through a lot as we've been dealing with this virus. And we've been dealing with the media's portrayal of the virus. And quite frankly, I don't know about you, I'm pretty sick of it. But you will notice there how they used the example of the Spanish flu. Now, why do you think that they did that? Why do you think that we're sitting here having to listen to that newscast? Who else have you heard do that? The newscasts. You have also heard some of the medical experts compare it to this. They're medical experts, by the way, because I've heard from other experts in their field that this was nothing like that. And obviously, when you go and you look at the numbers, we don't have that, and it's not the case. But you see how that could spread the fear into everybody. And then you can also see how it's a control measure, as you know, that there, if you know anything about how brainwashing goes and about how the communists were able to use that during the Vietnam War to cause our own people, our own soldiers, to turn against one another willingly, you would know that you take away the hope, you cause a fear, and then you start to give out rewards, and then you lessen it a little bit, and then you do it again. And see, by doing those methods of pain and then release and then reward, and then more pain and then release and reward, then they're able to control the people. And what happened there? What did we see during all of this? And we've seen people get online, and then they've gone against one another. They've turned people in, and then throughout the fear. And then, of course, so people now, at this point, nobody wants to get sick. So when the novel coronavirus, the so-called COVID-19, got out there into the public, and everybody's seen how quickly this was spreading, they jumped on it here in the U.S. Now, we know that President Trump surrounded himself with already established members that he didn't hire in the CDC. And then that's why we have to deal with people like Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx. And in some later programs, we're going to try and examine those people because they have some strong Jesuit ties. And if anybody knows anything about what we talk about in our information, in our programs such as this one, and then also in the Social Injustice book, is we talk strongly about the Jesuits and about the control that they have over this nation, over this other nations, and over the world, as a matter of fact. But especially when it was regarding the illegal immigration issue, we saw that the problem is derived from them, and about how they were able to use a lot of the Islamic hijrah to come over here and cause civilization jihad. But you see here what's happening is you have your classic Howard Piven strategy is to break the ranks of everything and to cause the fear, and then people will willingly beg to have things done. So I think that's why you were able to see some measures taken there in California and in Washington and in New York, because they had a lot of that was spreading. And the reason is the population density. Of course, you can't deny that, because some of the things that they even do mention on here, are some facts. So what do? Is they know that they can put these facts on here and then give these facts to you, which causes you to believe everything else that they say after that. And we know that they were predicting, 2 million deaths, something like that. Did you see how inflated the number was on that newscast? What was Fauci doing? A couple million deaths are going to be happening, and then that number began to change a lot. And then we've seen it drop down, because certainly we've had, I think, a few thousand deaths now here in the U.S. to this point, and we know that it was probably at the beginning of January was the first case. So we're well on our way past March now. And then those numbers have increased, but the fact of the matter is they still are there, but they're nothing. They're just no death is nothing. Now we all know that, and we all know that we need to be concerned for one another, but the numbers just don't add up in the deaths. And a lot of conservatives have seen that, and a lot of people who would kick back against such things have seen this issue raised before them. But you know that the media is being used in this whole issue. And that is one of the things that we're trying to tell you here. They were able to use the social media. They were ready to use that. And they are flooding also the media with you. They're flooding it with information, and then we could see here in this that they were using that in some of the scenarios. If we would go ahead and jump to a cut here, and I'll prove my point there exactly about how they were talking about flooding that and about using the ability to influence, and that would be Tim Evans. And Tim Evans he was formerly of World Bank, and he spoke about that in one of the segments. I think it was the communications segment. And what was the thing that he said? He was talking about using the faith leaders. And then if you go over here, they had Hashti Tagi. She's with NBC Universal. Now we're getting into the media point here, and what is one of the things that she was saying to do? And she was talking about stopping the conspiracy theories. So we'll go ahead and then we'll look into and listen to what she said, and then we'll talk more about that as we roll cut 7 here.
Stephen's note real quick about the public communication. My team has been monitoring the public response, and on various social media channels and cable networks there's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit. So as we move forward, obviously trust in pharmaceuticals and government is very important at this moment. And so as we move forward with developing the right scenarios, we have to make sure that the public communication is a major part of that because of these conspiracy theories.
And right. What does she say there? She's talking about the conspiracy theories and about how it's eroding the trust in the places like the UN and among all of the people that are supposedly the trusted sources. And see, that is an issue there that we need to be dealing with, is because you've heard them repeatedly, as we've seen with all of the conferences that the virus task force that Trump put together to do these daily briefings with Pence and him. You got Deborah Birx up there, Anthony Fauci, and Anthony Fauci keeps on talking about the vaccination. Now, we're not going to get into that right now because we're focusing here on the Event 201, but it's so quickly how the Bill Gates himself and his foundation have talked about that they're ready to put forth vaccination trials. That's extremely fast, because what did Fauci say in that he talked about it being a year to 14, 16-month turnaround for us to even see anything that would be able to be used as a vaccine. And you know that what they were doing when they started talking about that is to automatically discredit people who would say that this was. Notice how Hashti in that clip said that she was going to combat how we talk about the UN and the organizations having released that. Why would we think that, guys? With this view, if that they weren't ready for the fact that people like me and other people who are much more experts in this and been following it extremely closely, that they would automatically turn to doing the UN, because we know that the UN has been trying to do a power grab for quite some time. We know, as we have spoken, and I'm sorry, but the facts are the facts, that the Vatican has been going for power control. That's why you have seen the Pope compare it to climate change, which they did a lot of this in the Event 201. But the fact of the matter is that's what they're trying to do, is they don't want you to sit there and say what's the facts. They don't want you to be out there saying and accusing the UN and their people of doing this thing, because they already knew we were going to say that. So what was she doing? She said that they need to be out there combating this with the news media. And do we really want to trust the news media at this point? I mean, what good has the news media been to us in any way? And this is where Brad Conant, he's with Henry Schein Incorporated. They are a medical device company. One of the things that they were talking about hoarding, and this was one of the first things that we saw when all of this came out, about and how they started accusing us and everybody else of hoarding, how people ran in, they got the toilet paper, and were getting prepared. And then they were condemning all of the people running to the stores to get food, because boom, as soon as this came out, that, you know, people were going to get prepared because they were get the feeling that we were about to be locked down by some kind of executive orders anyway. And that's because you have people that are out there who are informed, and they talk to their family members. And a lot of us get mocked on these things, but the fact of the matter is we still talk about it, and we still raise the warning and the siren out there, because that's just the purpose here that we have at Battlefront Southgate here on the Gatekeepers Podcast Network, is that we are seeking to educate you so that you are ready for events like this, and not just events like this, but to see the things that are going to happen as we get these power grabs by globalists, and how people in your communities are doing things that conform to the UN Agenda 2030. Now, there is so much things and so many methods that's being done here, and there's so much power grabs going all at once. I don't believe it's just one thing. Everybody here is trying to grab for power, and with this preparation here, we know it was the globalists. Now, we've been talking, not just us, but many of us have been talking for quite some time, that we believed that there was going to be some kind of effort made that would discredit the Trump presidency. Now, you know, we have dealt with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, how they tried to impeach President Trump, and that failed. Now, isn't it kind of curious how this happened immediately after that? Maybe they were distracting us with the impeachment itself as they were preparing, buying time for the globalists. And we're just asking questions here. These are just questions. It doesn't mean that we believe that that's a fact. We're still investigating this anyway. But as we look here at Event 201, it's kind of hard to deny this issue. It's kind of hard to deny that these globalists haven't been planning to make some kind of power grab. That these globalists haven't been doing this to throw this out there. They threw a wrench in the economy. We shut down the country. We willingly shut down the country. We allowed people who are our representatives to get out there and tell us that we have to stay indoors. Now, you know that if you put people and give people information, a lot of them will voluntarily make decisions which they are supposed to on their own, because we need to make decisions on our own in order to do this. Now, I know here in the South, a lot of us, we went and got our food. A lot of people loaded up on the toilet paper, and then they were talking about the hoarding. And so what happens there, you're accusing people who are going to be prepared for a problem for hoarding. And as we'll see as we're coming up here on another break, that these issues have begun to steamroll us, and it steamrolled the economy. And I believe that what we've seen here with this Event 201 was a lot of these globalists, especially the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who regularly donates, and it's run mostly by Melinda Gates. Bill's name's on there, but it's pretty much run by Melinda Gates. She's the star here, okay? And if you knew, she was donating to some of the people that are in the Jesuit organizations. But we're coming up on a break, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and examine more of this in the time that we have remaining. This is Battlefront itself.
Just in terms of the precise question being asked, it's clear that having everybody go it on their own is not going to be the most effective answer, right? So I absolutely agree with the comments that have been made that we need to have some kind of international mechanism for coordinating what it is that we would be doing, also for collecting information, also for understanding what the resources are that are available through international mechanisms to execute on that allocation and coordination. I think it's challenging to set it up in a way that says that international mechanism has to be the body that decides in all circumstances what the allocation is. In other words, I think states are going to want to be able to decide for themselves on, in some circumstances, some of the issues that are relevant. So one of the challenges will be ensuring that you're using an existing mechanism, and I think Sophia's right about the UN as being sort of the base of operations in a sense, both for the funding but also for a whole series of other issues that you would be looking at for allocation, coordination, et cetera. But then making sure that states are stepping up to actually tell people what it is that they're doing, what their decisions are in that context, and creating transparency about what the proper allocation should be for containing this issue so that there can be pressure put to bear on ensuring that states are actually doing what the larger plan needs to be in that context.
Welcome to the final segment of SouthGate. You just heard there Avril Haines. She was the former deputy advisor for the Obama administration. And see, what we were talking about in the last segment was that there was Hashtag of NBC Universal talking about the conspiracy theories about how everybody was saying the UN would be the one to release that. Now, we don't know for a fact if that's what happened here. All right? But again, we're asking questions here, and we're just presenting what we see. But you'd have to say that in her little scenario there, and she was just suggesting that the UN has the capabilities to do these things and oversee. Now, something else interesting that you might have heard in that clip. I know you caught it. That's right. Because what did she say? Is that they needed to have an overseer. And what this overseer would do is to cause all of the people who would have sovereignty issues and would have, like, let's say like our U.S. Constitution that says that everything would be to the states, and about how we are sovereign from the other nations, and about how nobody is a foreign ruler over us, and about how we are a government for the people, by the people. But what does she say there is that they would probably keep back about this. So what do? They want to have this organization that will be able to stop the problem with that and to make them strongly comply. Now, you have to ask yourself, as you've seen it to this point, has that happened? Because we're sitting here where states have automatically forced lockdowns, which is unconstitutional. They've declared executive orders to where they said that you would have to do these things, and where they seized power and declared these national emergencies. In Texas, he deferred it to the localities, but then step by step, they began to do it. Now, they're not necessarily going out there enforcing, at least in my area, such a police state as they would, but they're doing it in more underhanded ways. Don't think for a second that these people aren't complying, because you know that they go into their schools and then they're taught to pretty much not adhere to our constitutional republic. You know that a lot of them are being taught by those who want to see the UN in power, that are globalists, a lot of these companies that were sitting there. So we'll go ahead and real quickly go ahead and list, so that you just get an eye view, because we haven't done this yet, is we're going to list and tell you the people who are sitting there at that round table. And that would be LaToya Abbott of the Marriott International. It's a hotel chain, right? Then Tom Inglesby of the John Hopkins University. Sophia Borges, she's of the UN Foundation. Brad Conant, Henry Schein Incorporated, that medical supply company. Chris Elias of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're going to get to him in a second with the time that we do have remaining, because we're running out of time here. George Hao of the China CDC. Funny how he was ready for that, and then where did it come from? Those guys were ready to lie, and then the WHO that has an official over it that's not even a medical doctor, he has the strong communist ties, and then what did? They lied, and our own CDC, who seems to be a useless organization, was given the facts and echoing the sentiments of WHO, because they're all in line. Avril Haines, who was the former deputy U.S. National Security Advisor under the Obama administration. And then also, if you think she was also, I believe, was the first head of CIA. I needed to go back and look at that, but I think that's one of the first women things that we're doing, because we just love feminism here, about how we have these preferred people groups. Nobody can get anything off of their own merit. But I digress. Then you have Matthew Harrington of the Edelman. You have Jane Halton of the AMZ Bank. She was a former deputy of health and finance in Australia. Martin Unkel of the Tunza Group. And then you had Eduardo Martinez of the UPS Foundation. That guy's key there. Maybe we'll get into him here in a little later program. About how, because the whole logistics thing. We also know that with the UPS has been participating in Sharia finance, which regularly donates to the groups who are fronts for places like Hamas and stuff that comply to making our country and other various places to be under the caliphate. And then you have Stephen Redd of the U.S. CDC. We'll talk about him later. He has also been on news. We know that he himself has been doing a lot of these recommendations, and he's been going around doing that. So he was quite ready for this. Adrian Thomas of Johnson & Johnson, another company who's a globalist company, doesn't care anything about state sovereignty, has a lot involved with the Walmart Corporation. That's another thing I was surprised not to see a CEO from Walmart at this. But I'm sure, as well as Walmart's been doing, and Hannity, you're sitting there loving on them. They hate this country. Remember that these guys were pushing for the Affordable Care Act on the radio and everywhere else. Then you have Hashti Taghi from the NBC Universal Media. She was the woman you've seen in the clips, and about how she is, of course, of the mainstream media and controls all of the complex of that. Then you have Levon Theroux. He's the chief representative of the Monetary Authority of Singapore there in New York. Now, there's something that you need to be thinking about that was very curious about all of this, guys, and that is that everything seems to point of, I think that this is something that I also think is a preparation for, a lot of it was compared to climate change in this. And you got to remember that we have that sustainable development and all of those issues that's with the UN Agenda 2030. And a lot of these people, they comply with this. A lot of these major corporations, which have closed down their branches all over our nation, all of these guys there's more, as you would go and listen to all of this, that you'll hear them talking about how everybody trusts the CEOs and about how everybody will do what the CEO is saying, about how they're going to use that to get people to comply with everything. And if we'll go ahead and cue up Hashti Taghi again, and she talks about how to control this. And I know we're focusing on a lot of communication, but the communication is key. And she talks here about how there is a trust with the employers, and then a trust with the mainstream media. And as we cue up cut 13 here, you'll see that she was talking about trusting the employer, how they will use that to stop and control the narrative. And so here we go ahead with cut 13.
Hashti.
So looping back into the trust barometer, last year in Davos it was released that trust in traditional media sources has grown, while trust in social media sources has gone down, specifically after the last elections in the United States. So I think one of the ways that we need to approach this is to make sure that we have the right representatives on traditional media networks in order to portray our side of the story and make sure that there isn't misinformation. I agree with Jane that shutting down internet is only going to cause extra panic and extra anxiety. In fact, that staff tells me places where internet access has been shut down, there's unrest growing. So we're not only dealing with this specific situation, but really people not trusting their governments at this point. And so I think we really need to make sure, one, from a news perspective, that information is being disseminated correctly, and that we have the right resources out there to provide this information. I also think that there is a good point in trusting in employees, in your employers. There are lots of communications channel. For example, during the Ebola crisis at Texas Children's Hospital, we had daily briefings with the CDC to tell us what the situation was. And because of those daily briefings, we used between the intranet, internal global communications, and town halls, we use those sources to be able to disseminate information and make sure that our employees knew exactly what was going on, coming straight from the source, whether it was from our CEO, our chief nursing officer, or others within the hospital.
Yeah, so that was quite loaded right there. Now, something that I caught there at the end, if you would listen to how she talks about the trust in the employers. Another thing that you probably were laughing when you heard her say that they've shown that people stopped trusting social media. She's projecting there. We know that people don't believe that because we know that Facebook has made a concerted effort to squash good media sources such as people like Breitbart and other independent news outlets that do report unbiased to a point of the news out there that are reporting more than just some narrative and actually reporting truth and not falsehoods. But did you catch what she said that they were going to do there? And that was that using the hospital during the Ebola crisis that they dealt with, that they are going to use daily briefings with the CDC and about how they would use the traditional media sources to do that. Curious. What have you been seeing with these daily briefings that we've been doing that? Because what are they trying to do? They're trying to coax the public into conforming to everything that they're demanding that they do. Now, we know that the economy has been put on hold pretty bad. We knew that there was a crash coming at some point anyway, but now it has been done. And so you're trying to get all these people to comply, so they do these daily briefings. And then they're using the CDC, all these experts, to console you and to make you feel better, but then make you fear some more and then make you feel better again. And she said that they didn't want to shut down any of the mainstream, the internet, the social media. And you hear a lot of them speak throughout about all of this. They talked about monitoring this and surveilling that they would use things that say that I'm on here saying these things and the things that I tweet out. They use that and grab that information so that they know how to fight against it. And they use that in order to first discredit us. And they did that initially, and that's why they get on there. You've seen that more and more in these last briefings lately, that they're really fighting against that. And then you also see how they keep on with the reporters in the room there with Trump and everybody, how they keep on pushing that narrative of the falsehoods there, and they haven't relinquished that. They haven't stopped doing that. They keep on saying the same things repeatedly. But you see, that's what they're doing, is they're breaking you down, because you continually hear that, and they're convinced that you'll continually keep hearing that you'll eventually believe that it's real and true. And so that's what she is saying in that. And now, guys, we're coming to the end of our program. And what we need to do is sit here and think clearly. I'm calling on you guys to get out there and stand strong, because we know that God is in control of everything. None of this surprised him, okay? It surprised us. That's true. But God knows the beginning from the end. He is in control. He sets up these authority figures, and for his purpose. All things are for his purpose. So whatever his purpose may be in all of this, we're going to have to find it. And we're going to have to understand it. And we're going to have to know that that's what he does. And he will always be there for his people. So you continually to stay in prayer. And you continue to do the things that you know is right. And you continue to beat the war drum of the truth and information of what they're trying to do with you on social media. You know that you have the facts in your hands, and you know that you are able to make the things that are wrong stop. You have to stand up for yourself. You cannot let these people stop you. You cannot let your own people, your neighbors and everybody that are talking bad about you, maybe because you're out there beating the wardrobe on the effort of not being controlled by the government, that maybe you're onto something, and you need to keep beating that, because you're going to learn to count your principles more than the number of your friends, because these days are dark. And that is quite a fact. And you're seeing that more and more on social media. And they are controlled by these people. It's just the way it is. They build that adrenaline up, they make you fear, and then they show up as the heroes. This has been shown in many times in other efforts before. And now, as we go into letting you head out to what you're doing, guys, stay strong, continue in prayer, because you know that you are the strong, and you know that you can get out there and make a difference in your communities to stop these people who are infiltrating and trying to subvert you. This has been Dustin Faulkner, and this has been a production of Battlefront Broadcasting, and it has been a production of Gatekeepers Online. Please stand strong, get out there, and remember that God is in control of everything. SouthGate, out.